I remember the exact night things started to feel irreversible. Funny enough, it was also the night I had been mindlessly scrolling through random forums on gptonline.ai, trying to distract myself from the growing silence between us. It wasn't always like that. When I first met her, everything felt effortless in a way I didn't know relationships could be. We met at a mutual friend's birthday, one of those crowded apartments where the music is too loud and conversations blur together. She was standing by the kitchen counter, laughing at something someone said, and I remember thinking she looked like she belonged in a different scene entirely, like she had accidentally wandered into the wrong movie. I made some awkward comment about the music being terrible, and she laughed. Not politely, genuinely. That was it. That was all it took. We spent the rest of the night talking. Not flirting, not trying too hard, just talking. About stupid things at first, like how both of us hated olives. Then somehow about childhood memories, family, fears. It felt like skipping the shallow parts and landing straight into something real. For the first year, everything was easy. We texted constantly, saw each other almost every day, and never ran out of things to say. Even silence felt comfortable back then. We could sit on opposite ends of the couch, doing our own thing, and it still felt like connection instead of distance. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what people mean when they talk about finding the right person. Looking back now, I think the first cracks appeared so quietly I didn't even recognize them as cracks. It started with small things. She began canceling plans more often. At first, she always had a reason. Work stress, family stuff, headaches. All valid. I didn't question it. I told myself I was being supportive. Then came the delays in texting. Messages that used to take seconds turned into hours. Sometimes I'd see her online, active, and still no reply. I tried not to overthink it. I didn't want to be that guy. When I finally asked her about it, she smiled, kissed me, and said I was imagining things. That she'd just been busy. And I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to. The thing is, when you love someone, you start negotiating with your own intuition. You convince yourself that discomfort is just insecurity, that distance is temporary, that everything will settle back into place if you just give it time. But time didn't fix anything. It just made the silence heavier. There was a moment, I remember it clearly, when I realized I was the only one trying to keep things from slipping. I was the one suggesting plans, starting conversations, asking how her day was. Her responses became shorter, flatter. Not cold exactly, but absent. Like she was there out of habit, not intention. I told myself she was going through something. That I should be patient. That relationships have phases. But patience started to feel like waiting alone. And then came that night. We were sitting in her apartment, the TV on, but neither of us watching. The room felt wrong. Not tense, not explosive, just empty in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I hadn't seen her look back at me the same way in weeks. So I said it. I feel like we're drifting apart. I didn't say it dramatically. I didn't accuse her. It came out quieter than I expected, almost like I was asking a question instead of stating a fact. For a second, I thought she'd deny it, or argue, or reassure me. Instead, she just sighed. Not angrily, not defensively, just tired. And then she said, I don't know what you want me to say. Something about the way she said it hit harder than any argument could have, because it didn't sound like confusion. It sounded like she had already checked out. And in that moment, I realized I might be the only one still holding on to something that no longer existed. I didn't respond right away, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because everything I could say suddenly felt pointless. Her words hung in the air, heavy in a way that made the room feel smaller. I don't know what you want me to say. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't even dismissive. It was worse, it was empty. I tried to search her face for something. Regret. Concern. Anything that would suggest she still cared enough to fight for us. But she just looked tired. I'm not asking for a perfect answer. I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. I don't feel like we're okay anymore. She nodded slowly, like she agreed with the statement, but didn't feel the need to elaborate. That silence stretched longer than it should have. You don't feel it? I asked. I don't know, she said again, rubbing her temple like this conversation was physically exhausting her. Things are just different. Different. It was such a vague word, but it carried everything I had been afraid of. Different meant not what it used to be. Different meant something had already changed, and neither of us knew how to fix it. Or worse, maybe only one of us cared to. Different how? I pushed. She hesitated. For a moment, I thought she might actually open up. Her lips parted slightly, like she was about to say something real, something honest. But then she just shrugged. I don't know. I've just been in my head a lot. That answer should have been enough. It was reasonable. People get overwhelmed. People withdraw. But something about the way she said it felt like a wall, not an explanation. Is it me? I asked. And that's when she looked at me properly for the first time that night. Not with affection, not with anger, with something I couldn't fully place at the time. Now I think it was guilt. No, she said quickly. Too quickly. It's not you. I nodded, even though I didn't believe her. Because if it wasn't me, then why did it feel like I was slowly disappearing from her life while still standing right in front of her? We sat there for a while after that, both pretending the conversation hadn't just cracked something open. The TV kept playing in the background, some random show neither of us cared about, filling the space where we used to have conversations. At some point, she leaned her head on my shoulder. It should have felt comforting, familiar, but it didn't. It felt like muscle memory, like she was going through the motions of being close without actually being present. And I hated that I noticed the difference. I hated that I could feel the absence of something that used to be so natural. Do you want to stay over? She asked later, casually, as if everything was normal. I hesitated. That hesitation was new. Before, I would have said yes without thinking. Staying with her used to feel like the most obvious choice in the world. Now it felt like a question with weight. Yeah, I said eventually, because I wasn't ready to face what it would mean if I said no. That night, lying next to her, I realized something else had changed. We didn't touch. Not intentionally. Not consciously. We just didn't. There was space between us. Not much, physically, but enough to feel like a distance I couldn't cross. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, listening to her breathing, trying to convince myself she was just tired, that everything would feel normal again in the morning. But deep down, there was this quiet, persistent thought I couldn't shake. What if this is the new normal? And worse, what if she's already okay with that? I woke up before her. That alone wasn't unusual. I've always been the kind of person who wakes up early, even without an alarm. But that morning, there was something different in the air, something heavier than the quiet that filled her apartment. For a few seconds, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out why I felt this tightness in my chest. And then I remembered. The conversation. Her sigh? The way she said she didn't know what I wanted her to say. I turned my head slightly to look at her. She was facing away from me, curled up on her side, her back toward me. At some point during the night, she had moved even farther away. There was now a clear gap between us, the kind that didn't happen by accident. I told myself not to overthink it. People move in their sleep. But I couldn't ignore how symbolic it felt. I lay there for a while, debating whether I should close that gap, wrap an arm around her like I used to, pretend everything was still intact. It would have been easy, familiar, but I didn't, because something stopped me. Not pride, not anger, uncertainty. I didn't know if she would lean into it or stiffen, and that scared me more than rejection itself. So I got out of bed quietly and went to the kitchen. Her apartment looked the same as always. Same mugs, same half-dead plant on the windowsill, same faint smell of her shampoo lingering in the air. Nothing had physically changed, and yet everything felt off. I made coffee, more out of habit than desire, and stood by the window watching the street slowly come to life. People walking their dogs, cars passing by, normal life continuing like nothing had shifted. It felt strange, how something could be falling apart so quietly while the rest of the world stayed completely indifferent. I heard her footsteps behind me. "Hey," she said, her voice still heavy with sleep. I turned and gave her a small smile. "Morning." She walked over, took a mug without asking, and poured herself coffee. Another small thing that used to feel intimate. Now it felt routine. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I lied. She nodded, like she expected that answer. For a moment, I thought about bringing up last night again. About pushing for clarity, for something solid to hold on to. But looking at her, I could already tell she wasn't there mentally. She was present physically, but her mind was somewhere else. "Do you have work today?" I asked instead. "Yeah. Later," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "You?" "Same." And just like that, we slipped into safe, neutral conversation. Weather, work, random things that didn't matter. It was surreal. We had just acknowledged that something between us was breaking, and now we were talking like acquaintances trying to avoid awkwardness. At one point, she checked her phone. I noticed it without meaning to. Her expression shifted slightly, not dramatically, just enough for me to catch it. A small flicker of something. Focus. Maybe even interest. Who's that? I asked, trying to sound casual. She didn't hesitate. Just work stuff. She locked her phone and set it face down on the counter. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because that was new. She never used to hide her phone like that. Not consciously, not deliberately. It had always just been there. Open. Unimportant. Now it felt like something she was protecting. And I hated that my mind went there. I hated that I even noticed. Because once you start noticing things like that, it's almost impossible to stop. You sure? I asked before I could stop myself. She looked at me, her brow slightly furrowed. What do you mean? Nothing, I said quickly. Just asking. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. You don't trust me? She asked. It wasn't accusatory. It was worse. It sounded tired. Like she didn't have the energy to even argue about it. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. And there it was again. That same feeling from the night before. Not conflict. Not emotion. Just distance. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. It wasn't just that we were drifting apart. It was that every attempt to close the distance only seemed to push her further away. I left her apartment later than I should have. Not because I had any reason to stay, but because leaving felt like acknowledging something I wasn't ready to accept. As long as I was still there, still part of her space, I could pretend things were just strained. Not broken. She walked me to the door like she always did. That routine hadn't changed either. We stood there for a second, facing each other. Usually, this was the part where she'd smile, maybe pull me in for a kiss, say something small, but warm like, text me when you get home. This time, she just looked at me. Not cold. Not distant in an obvious way. Just neutral. I leaned in first. The kiss was brief, soft, but empty. It felt like checking a box rather than wanting it. Text me when you get home, she said anyway. The words were right. The tone wasn't. Yeah, I replied. And then I left. The moment the door closed behind me, I felt it. That quiet drop in my chest, like missing a step you didn't know was there. I stood in the hallway for a second longer than necessary, staring at the door like it might open again. It didn't. The drive home was worse than I expected. There's something about being alone after something like that. No distractions, no pretending. Just you and your thoughts, replaying every word, every pause, every look. I kept thinking about her phone, about the way she flipped it face down, about that subtle shift in her expression when she read the message. It could have been nothing. Work, a friend, anything. But my brain didn't want anything. It wanted a reason. By the time I got home, I had already constructed half a dozen scenarios in my head, none of them good. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was being paranoid, that relationships go through rough patches, that not every distance means betrayal. But there was a difference between distance and secrecy, and I couldn't ignore that something about her felt hidden. I texted her like I said I would. Got home. She replied 10 minutes later. Okay. That was it. No heart. No good. No follow-up. Just okay. I stared at the message longer than I should have, like maybe it would change if I looked at it differently. It didn't. That day at work, I couldn't focus. Everything felt slightly out of place, like I was operating on autopilot. I reread emails 3 times, forgot what I was doing mid-task, checked my phone more often than I'd like to admit. She didn't text again. Not once. Around mid-afternoon, I gave in. Hey, how's your day going? It was a normal message. Safe. Casual. She replied an hour later. Busy. Nothing else. No question back. No effort to continue the conversation. Just a wall. And that's when it really started to sink in. It wasn't just a bad night. It wasn't just stress. It was a shift. Something fundamental had changed in how she showed up for me, and maybe how she felt about me. That evening, I did something I'm not proud of. I opened her social media. Not because I expected to find anything concrete, but because I needed something. Anything. To either confirm my fears or prove them wrong. At first, everything looked normal. Same posts. Same stories. But then I noticed something. A comment. From a guy I didn't recognize. It wasn't overtly flirty. Just a simple, "This looks great," under a picture she posted a couple days ago. She had replied, "Thanks, smiley face." Again, nothing suspicious on its own. But I clicked his profile anyway. And that's when my stomach dropped. Because I saw her there. Not in a post. In a tagged story from 2 nights ago, a place she told me she hadn't gone to. Standing next to him, I must have stared at that story for 10 minutes straight. Not because I didn't understand what I was seeing, but because my brain refused to process it fully. It kept trying to find alternative explanations, softer versions of reality that didn't feel like a punch to the chest. Maybe it was old. Maybe she ran into him by accident. Maybe she didn't think it was important enough to mention. But none of those maybes explained one simple fact. She told me she stayed home that night. I remember it clearly. I had asked if she wanted to hang out, and she said she was too tired, that she just wanted to rest. I even told her to take it easy, to get some sleep. And while I was sitting at home, thinking I was being understanding, she was out somewhere else. With him. I clicked through the rest of his profile. Not obsessively at first, just enough to get a sense of who he was. Same city, similar age, mutual followers. That last part bothered me more than anything. This wasn't some random guy. This was someone already orbiting her world. I went back to her messages. Busy. That single word suddenly felt different. Not distant. Dishonest. I put my phone down, then picked it up again almost immediately. My hands felt restless, like I needed to do something, anything, to release the tension building in my chest. I could confront her, send a screenshot, ask directly, but something held me back. Because I didn't just want answers. I wanted the truth. And those two things aren't always the same. So instead, I waited. That evening, she texted me first. Hey. Just that. No context. No follow-up. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just seen something that quietly rewrote the last few days of our relationship. Hey, I replied. I kept it neutral. Controlled. How was your day? Long, she said. Yours? Same. There was a pause. Then she added, sorry if I've been a bit off lately. I stared at that message. Part of me felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe she was about to open up, explain everything, make it make sense. It's okay, I typed. You want to talk about it? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, her reply came. I don't really know what to say. The same line, different context, same impact. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my frustration from spilling over. You've said that before, I wrote. But something's clearly going on. I'm just stressed, she replied. Work, life, everything. There it was again. Vague. Safe. Untouchable. I looked back at the screenshot I had saved. Her, standing next to him. Close enough that it didn't look accidental. Comfortable in a way that didn't match the distance she'd been giving me. I typed out a message. I saw the story you were tagged in. I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I asked something else. Were you out the other night? There was a longer pause this time. Long enough that I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Then her reply came. No. I told you I stayed in. And that was the moment something inside me shifted. Not shattered. Not exploded. Just shifted. Because it wasn't the possibility of her seeing someone else that hit the hardest. It was the lie. Clear. Direct. Unnecessary. I looked at the unsent message again. At the evidence sitting right there in my phone. And I realized something I hadn't fully understood until that second. This wasn't just about what she did. It was about who she had become with me. Or maybe who she had stopped being. I finally pressed send. I know that's not true. The typing bubble appeared almost instantly. Then stopped. Then disappeared completely. And just like that, she went silent. For a while, I just sat there staring at the screen. No typing bubble. No reply. Nothing. The silence felt louder than anything she could have said. It stretched on in a way that made every second feel deliberate, like she was choosing not to respond rather than not knowing how. I checked the time. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Still nothing. I tried to distract myself, but it was pointless. My mind kept circling back to the same thought. If there was a reasonable explanation, she would have said it already. Silence, in that moment, felt like confirmation. After 20 minutes, I sent another message. I'm not trying to start a fight. I just want honesty. That was the truth. Or at least, part of it. What I really wanted was for her to prove me wrong. To give me something solid to hold on to that didn't feel like it was slipping through my hands. This time, she replied, "Why are you checking up on me?" I blinked at the screen. Out of everything she could have said, that was her response. "I'm not checking up on you," I wrote back. I saw it. You were tagged. Another pause. Then, it wasn't a big deal. I felt something tighten in my chest. You told me you stayed home. I didn't think it mattered. That line hit harder than I expected. Not because it was aggressive, but because of how casually she said it. Like the problem wasn't what she did, but that I noticed. It matters to me, I replied. There was a longer delay this time. When she finally responded, the tone had shifted. You're making this bigger than it is. I let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. Am I? I typed. Because from where I'm sitting, you lied to me. I didn't lie, she said. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing. No, it's not. The conversation was starting to feel surreal. Not explosive, not chaotic, just disconnected. Like we were arguing from completely different realities. Who is he? I asked. Her reply came quickly this time. A friend. Of course. How long? What does that even mean? How long have you known him? A while. Every answer felt intentionally vague, like she was giving me just enough to respond without actually saying anything real. Why didn't you tell me you were going out with him? I pressed. I didn't go out with him, she replied. He was just there. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to stay grounded. Then why did you lie about staying home? No answer. I waited and waited. Eventually, I didn't want to deal with this. That was it. That was the closest thing to honesty I had gotten. Not because it explained anything, but because it revealed something else. She wasn't avoiding the truth because it was complicated. She was avoiding it because it was inconvenient. For her. And suddenly, everything started to make sense in a way I didn't want it to. The distance. The short replies. The lack of effort. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't stress. It was detachment. She had already started emotionally stepping away, long before I had the words to say we were drifting apart. I just hadn't caught up yet. So what are we doing? I asked. That question sat there for a long time. Longer than any other message in our conversation. When her reply finally came, it was exactly what I had been afraid of. I don't know. Same words. Same tone. But this time, they felt final. Because now I understood what she really meant. She didn't know because she wasn't trying to figure it out anymore. I didn't reply immediately. Not because I was waiting for the right words, but because I finally understood there weren't any that would change the outcome. For the first time since all of this started, I wasn't trying to fix it in my head. I was just seeing it. Clearly, all the moments I had brushed off suddenly lined up in a way that felt almost obvious. The canceled plans, the delayed replies, the way her attention seemed to exist somewhere just out of reach. Even that night, when I told her we were drifting apart, her response hadn't been confusion. It had been resignation. I don't know. I read it again. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to argue with it. Instead, I typed something simple. I think you do. She didn't answer right away. But unlike before, the silence didn't feel suffocating. It felt expected. I set my phone down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling of my apartment. It looked exactly the same as it always had, but I felt like I was sitting in a completely different life than I had been a week ago. It's strange how quickly things can shift once you stop holding them together by yourself. After a while, my phone buzzed. I don't think this is working anymore. There it was. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just honest enough to hurt. I picked up the phone and read it a few times, letting it settle instead of reacting to it. I thought I would feel anger, or maybe even relief. But mostly, I felt tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep. The kind that comes from trying for too long without realizing you're the only one trying. When did you know? I asked. This time, she answered faster than I expected. I don't know exactly. I almost smiled at that. Of course she didn't. I think it just changed, she added. Gradually. Gradually. That word stayed with me. Because she was right. It hadn't been one moment. Not one fight. Not one mistake. Not one betrayal. It had been a slow fading. So why didn't you say anything? I wrote. There was a pause. Then, I didn't want to hurt you. I exhaled slowly. You still did. I know. That was the first time she admitted something without deflecting, without softening it into something vague. And weirdly, that honesty, late as it was, felt more real than anything else she'd said in weeks. Was there someone else? I asked. I hesitated before sending it. But I needed to know. Another pause. Longer this time. When her reply came, it was careful. There's no one serious. I stared at that sentence. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And that told me everything I needed to understand. Okay, I replied. No accusations. No follow-up questions. Just acceptance. Because at that point, the details didn't matter as much as the pattern. She had already stepped out of what we were, emotionally, if not completely physically. And I had been the last one to realize it. "I'm sorry," she sent. I believed her. That was the hardest part. I believed that she didn't plan for it to happen this way, that she didn't wake up one day and decide to hurt me. But intent doesn't undo impact. And care, when it comes too late, doesn't fix what's already been broken. "I know," I replied. That was the last message I sent her. She didn't respond after that. And somehow, that felt right. A clean end to something that had already been quietly ending for a while. That night, I didn't distract myself. I didn't scroll, didn't text anyone, didn't try to fill the silence. I just sat with the realization that love doesn't always end in explosions or clear betrayals. Sometimes it ends like this, in quiet conversations, in unanswered questions, in the moment you realize the other person stopped choosing you, and you were the last one to notice. And the hardest truth I had to accept wasn't that she had changed. It was that I had felt it happening the whole time. I just didn't want to believe it.